You know, it depends on a couple of factors, right? The person moves in next door. You'd like to know more about them. You know, you're a little worried, this and that. You might like to know what their records are. If they've got a criminal record, this or that. Or you're the individual and you're like, you know, that was a time in my life when I'd like to look past and I've straightened my life around. Nobody needs to know what those records are, except the court system and the judicial system itself. Because that's some of what ended up being talked about. And that's a new law in North Dakota, or at least something we need to discuss, the sealing of those records. Scott Brand with Nilson Brand Law joins us now. He's an attorney. Scott, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Thanks for having me, Joel.
Talk to me about this. What does it do?
Yeah, so it's a law that allows an individual to petition the court to ask to have their criminal records sealed from public viewing. Some people might not know that there's a website with North Dakota. You can just go on as any member of the public and see the criminal history of any individual. You just enter their name. And, you know, if kids do stupid things, right? Even when you turn 18, and some things are embarrassing.
I know this kid did. I didn't steal anything, but there are things that make me shake my head and wonder why I did it.
Yeah, right? And sometimes you get caught for those things. Oh. And now you're an adult and you don't want people to see those things, or you're applying for a job, or you're trying to maybe rent an apartment or things like that, and someone pulls up your criminal history, and then that's the reason they don't move forward with you. So,
you know, in terms of ages, you mentioned kids. Does this apply to someone who's 25?
Yeah, it literally applies to anyone.
Okay.
But the age limit is actually in your criminal activity. So if it's a misdemeanor offense that you committed, you have to essentially be crime-free for 3 years before you can ask the court to seal the record. If you've committed a felony, you have to wait 5 years before you can petition.
So if you've committed a felony, you can petition and potentially have the court seal those records. Let's say let's take it to the extreme. You've got an attempted murder charge. You know, you got out of jail after 20 years, 5 years later, you're doing good. It's 25 years. I never get to know that you've got an attempted murder conviction.
Well, the court takes into a bunch of factors into deciding whether to do it. Obviously, the severity of the crime makes it less likely that they're going to grant that. There are certain crimes that are prohibited from being sealed from public viewing. A lot of sex crimes where you have to register, you can't do that. Crimes that you committed when you can't possess a firearm, those are not permitted. So in theory, could you get some of those more serious charges sealed? Yes, but I think the court's more likely to not grant that request.
So, you know, let me use another example here. You've got a situation where an individual is out there applying for a job in a field that they might not belong in anymore based upon a previous action. Okay, let's just get down to it.
Yep.
That individual's an accountant and they stole a bunch of money. And now they're applying to be an accountant for another company. It's 5 years after the conviction. They want the record sealed. They say, go ahead and seal it. But I'm running a company and hiring an accountant that stole before.
Well, you still might be able, if you hire certain background professionals, to be able to find it. This, for the most part, just eliminates it from you going on to the North Dakota website and finding that.
Okay.
But again, the court has to take into a bunch of factors before deciding to do that. If you got caught with a major theft case and you wait just the exact bare minimum of 5 years, they might not grant that. The court takes into account the seriousness of the crime. Another factor, though, since we're talking about the 5 years, is how long has it been since that individual committed the crime? Let's say you did the theft 20 years ago and you're a completely different person now, and you can establish that record. The court's more likely to seal that. And then, yeah, the accounting firm probably won't know about it, but that's 20 years. It's less of a reflection on who you are today than who you were back then.
How does it work? Scott Brand is an employer, and he's looking to find out if Joel Heitkamp has a criminal record. You make a request in, and I'm not on the state's website, but, you know, does it show, you know, criminal, or not criminal, but record has been sealed? Or
Nope.
does it's just not there?
It's just not there.
Okay. So there isn't any big red flag that would hit an employer?
Not on the North Dakota website, no.
Okay, you're a defense and attorney by profession.
Right.
I mean, you've been in courtrooms and defended people that you did the best you could possibly do because they deserve good representation. And so, you know, not every one of those, I'm going to assume, has been innocent. You know, as a defense attorney, is this something that you see attorneys fighting for people that, like you, that are doggone good at what they do, that might be able to convince a judge in one way because of this process, that others might say, if you're the prosecution, what the heck are we even talking about here?
Well, the prosecution has a say in the matter.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, so you petition the court, and then the prosecutor can say that they either agree, don't object, or they can say, no, this absolutely needs to stay open. And then if the prosecutor objects to it, then we're going to go in front of a judge and have a full-blown hearing as to whether or not this record should be sealed.
Now, how long has this been in effect?
Not very long. I think it was passed just in the last session.
Do you see this happening a lot?
I'm seeing a good number of it coming through. I just had one approved maybe a couple weeks ago. I have a couple in front of a judge right now. And I get calls on it quite a bit. Even before this law passed, someone would call in and say, hey, I'm having a heck of a time getting an apartment because of this record from 5-10 years ago. What can I do? And before then, I had to tell them, talk to your legislator. Yeah. And now I tell them we can petition the judge and see if we can get that sealed for you.
What about, okay, the one thing North Dakota is very short of right now is employees for jobs. And yet you look at some of what we're talking about, some of these would be red flags on what could be a job pool, and a company policy doesn't allow them to hire based upon that.
Right.
And so we've got 5 years that have passed. Joel Heitkamp has behaved. He's turned his life around. Is this going to help fill some of those jobs?
I think it could, because some of the employers that I've seen, like, they have those, it's a hard policy, criminal record, nothing.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how long ago it happened. And so then these people are losing out on opportunities with employment, with housing. And now through this process, I think we've really opened up a new pool for employers to look at. Okay,
so let's take that another step. The individual that goes to another state, does this apply to them? In other words, if Joel Heitkamp moves to California and North Dakota has sealed those records, California doesn't get to know?
Well, if you move to California, you're not going to ask California to seal the records. You still have to apply here. And again, it's a public search that that's being sealed. I don't know what the ability of any other state really is to see what North Dakota has, but they have their own ways of intergovernmental communication to see what the record is.
But what about certain? Let's use pot as an example. I've long been an advocate of let's get off the whole get after people that smoke pot.
Right.
I don't think it's a gateway drug. I think that people are very naive if they don't realize that a lot of people do it. Let's just quit throwing people in prison for smoking pot. But
right.
In many cases in North Dakota, you still have pot be a felony charge and can be on someone's record
right.
for that level. Do you see this getting used a lot for that?
I hope so, because the laws in North Dakota are changing. The laws across the country are changing especially when it comes to marijuana. We have legal medicinal marijuana in North Dakota now. So if someone was using it for their medicinal needs and they got caught criminally with it, this would be a great avenue to get that taken off.
This is kind of built for that. One of the things that I know the legislator that worked on this, and one of the points that she was trying to make was, look, we've got people in jail that don't need to be in jail. They're not threats. And she's smart enough, I think, to realize
Yep.
that we need people in the workforce. This is patterned after that.
Yeah, and she's absolutely right. People should not be losing out on employment opportunities because of marijuana.
Yeah, and I don't want to, she. There are people watching her saying, just say it. Shannon Roars-Jones, Republican from South Fargo, is one of the individuals I've
Yep.
spoke to on this a number of times, and Shannon's a candidate for mayor of Fargo right now as well. But here's what I find interesting. Some of the people that might take this on, that might say, boy, we can't have this. And we'll go back to using marijuana as an example. Some of those individuals, 10 years, 20 years in college, smoked pot.
Yep.
This could be them.
Or it also could be someone who was in college and drank and got a minor in possession.
Yeah.
And it's still lingering around. And I've talked to a couple of friends about this issue, and they're like, oh, well, that's not on my record anymore. It happened so many years ago. And go do a public search of yourself on ND Courts, and sure enough, your record's there.
Okay, you're in a room with judges all the time and prosecutors.
Right.
What are they saying about this?
I'm
not saying name names, I'm just, you don't want to say, hey, this judge, that prosecutor, but what are they generally saying over the coffee?
I think that they're generally saying that this is a good idea. And I have enough faith in our judicial system to where they'll realize when a case is minor enough to where this should be no question for a sealing. And if it's something more serious, like the example that you gave, I mean, the judge isn't just going to willy-nilly be like, yeah, fine, seal it, you know. And there's a process for it. So if the judge wants to have a hearing, we'll have a hearing.